know that the corona time, most of us were affected.
इतना बेकार है
कैसे
बात करने अपना नंबर लग रहा था
हाँ, उस टाइम पे आई थिंक लक्ष्मी का इसी की वजह से गया
Yeah,
उसकी भी
light
लाइट गई
Okay, so during the corona time, I think we had a lot of problems. Many PGs couldn't attend the ward work, and of course the rounds, grand rounds were affected. And so we thought we will do a series of grand rounds with all the best examiners in the country. So first we have selected our sweet professor, Professor Anthony Rajan from Chennai Medical College. And the plan is like this, actually. We will have 3 grand rounds per week. That is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And, oh, Dr. Anthony is here. Hello, Professor. How are you, Professor? Can you unmute yourself? Yeah, unmute him. Unmute him. Unmute. Make co-host. Okay. Okay. Hi, Professor Anthony.
Hi, how are you?
With your blessings, Professor Anthony. So let me brief them about the program and then we will get started.
Yes.
Okay, so the program goes like this. We are going to have 3 grand rounds per week. And Professor Anthony today will be doing a year case. And it's going to be like a mock exam. He'll be examining a candidate. And you will get a lot of questions, and please write down all these questions in a notebook. And mostly these are the questions will be asked by almost all the examiners across the country. So he'll be covering the whole spectrum. We have he will be talking about the long case, then about the short case, and also the various parts. First of all, he will give you an idea of how a student should go and present and how he has to sit a little bit about, because as an examiner, he'll expect certain things from the student. We'll see what he expects, how confidently you should talk. Don't argue with the examiners like that. He will tell something. And then he will start this one. It will go for 1 hour and 15 minutes maximum. We are doing ear case today and tomorrow. We are doing nose case on Friday. And next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he will be covering larynx and hypopharynx. So that is the plan for Professor Anthony. Of course, we'll come to him for some more. So over to you, Professor Anthony. First of all, I want to ask a few questions. Exam going PGs.
Join button, yeah. Okay.
So exam going PGs, first of all, please, we'll wish them all very good luck for your exam. I hope all of you clear the exam with flying colors. And here, over to Professor Anthony.
Yeah. Good evening, all of you. It's always wonderful to be doing anything for Royal Pearl and Janagram. Let it be our Sesqui's music, singing, or dancing, and more so if it's an academic. I am so proud to be a friend of Janagram. He is a person who does everything with a style. What I mean by the style is that he goes into the depth of everything. When we started he is my classmate, and we have a class group of music group. When we started that music group, we used to post a lot of music intricacies and things like that. Once he joined the group, he took everybody into the singing mode. And any Tom, Dick and Harry is singing. Every day somebody will be just calling you to sing. He's such a versatile person. So I'm so happy when he said grand rounds. I said I'll be the part of it as soon as possible. Right. Examination is different for every person. Most of the time nowadays we don't fail students. Right, the passing has become reasonably easier these days, and university is doing all the things which will make the passing easier. But the problem is when you think of an exam.
Anto, it was not like that when we did no.
Yes, when you think of an exam, you ask Janagram. When Janagram finished his exam, he came out and said, "Yes, I did it." No, like that should be your way. That is the thing is, somebody is asking you a question. What's your name? it will tell your name, right? It will be spontaneous. Similarly, the answers got to be there, particularly for the easier questions, standard questions, and the basic questions. For that, if you are thinking that my name is, that's not correct. That's not expected. So when they ask a question, you give a sudden answer, spontaneous, expected answer. You have answered that question. If you have stumbled, waited for some time, and then they made you answer that question, that means you have not answered the question. You have allowed them to ask the next question. That's all. Okay, if you don't know, that's different. So generally speaking, that when you are going for an exam, the examination is done to check you up. How are you going to behave as an ENT surgeon in that particular hospital or in your training center when the ENT patient comes to you? It's not only how sure you are in making a diagnosis, how correct diagnosis or things like that. The first thing is how politely you behave, how you look. That really matters. Because just imagine you are going in the middle of a night to a doctor with an emergency for a small child, and the doctor is very funky, having a sort of colored hair, sleeveless and things like that, and sitting in his OPD, your confidence level will be low. So it's like, when you know how to examine the patient, how politely you should talk with the patient. And particularly nowadays, everybody is going for a corporate hospitals, and there if you are not, your body language, behavior is not up to the mark, you will face a lot of problems with your administration as well as with your colleagues, leave alone patients. So dress up properly. We spend a lot of time in net, everyone, right? But we don't look into common things like what's a casual wear, what's a formal wear, how to go for an exam. I'm sorry to tell you that I've seen people who are coming to an exam with a dirty coat. They expect you to come in a neat coat, preferably a well-ironed, well-washed coat, and with a cleanly shaven or well-groomed bed, and wear formal shoes and have a good body language. I have seen people who come to an exam. There was an undergraduate came to me as a student for the exam. He was not answering well. I asked him which unit you belong to. He said 4th unit. Oh, who's your chief? Anthony, sir. Where is he? He said sitting outside. So that is very bad for not knowing your unit chief. But all the more it is bad to know that you don't know your examiners. Try to find your examiners. When you go there, wish them and be little friendly. It doesn't mean you be, hey, how are you, man? It's not like that, but still, you got to be little friendly, have a smiling face, and then if that is if you're sit properly, and I have seen people sitting with the crossed legs. Fine, no, it shows an attitude which is not correct, because the patients are all coming with the agony, and your main problem is, even though if you don't treat them, you don't soothe their agony. So you got to be little polite, little decent, and things like that. So when they used to tell, if you go with kumkum and this thing, well grown up, go like a nice boy, present nicely, whatever. Don't be rude. Don't act like as if I know everything, right? You might know, but the thing is, it's always easy for an examiner to ask question. You need not know the answer. Second thing, the answer changes from time to time, right? For example, if they ask you who is the box office king of Tamil cinema, you ask today's people, they'll tell there are 2 actors here. One is Ajit Kumar, other one is Vijay. But you ask us, Rajinikanth. If you ask my parents, they will tell MGR. You ask my grandparents, they will tell the other person. So all the answers are right answers. All the answers are right answers. But the thing is, what examiner knows and what you know matters, right? You don't try to put up something very recent, comes in the journals and things like that, straight away. So they might not like it because you should know your history also, right? So you take and pray well before going for an exam, because you will be just thinking that examiner is old and so you will not know the recent concepts. And examiner will expect you to tell what is very recent, like Janagram come for an exam, what he will ask. But if you are thinking that everybody will be like Janagram and tell all the recent things, examiner might not like that also. They will expect you similarly when you say, for example, how do you do a postnasal examination? Fine, there is a way of examining postnasal space. Whether you do it or not today, you should know how you should do it. Right. So you can't just like that go until I will do the 30-degree endoscope. No, fine. That's an extension of an examination. So like that, you got to be very careful when you are presenting the case. And then similarly, go step by step. Everybody likes to give an answer which nobody knows. But all the examiner wants the answer that everybody knows. Very simple answers. They don't want very complicated, big answers. All of them want only very simple, sweet answers, right? And in an exam, they don't expect you to know big things. They'll ask the questions, very basic questions. They will ask you why you say this patient has got CSO. Means you should tell only two things. A patient has got discharge, a patient has got perforation. It's not that they will expect you what is this. And the second thing is that all the examiners are not always attentive. So when they ask a question, when you give an answer, the three examiners knew the they understood the answer, and the fourth examiner has not seen it. After 2-3 minutes, he might ask the same question. It doesn't mean what he is asking is not that what you are told is wrong. All you got to do is repeat it again. Probably you would not have been attentive at that particular point. Probably you would have got distracted by the patient or a co-examiner or what is around him. So keep answering basic. Prepare for the basic answers. Don't go for a big answer straight away. Right? This is like they used to tell that in the Kor Banega Korpadis. There are about 14 questions, and you try to answer that 14th question first and take all the money. It's not going to happen. First questions will be very simple questions. Only you got to answer. And if you answer about 10 questions, you will pass. After that, all these questions are all about your marks and how do you get. Okay. DNB, that's not a big problem because we hardly have about 3-4 stations where they go and talk with an examiner. But for MS postgraduates, you got to present it nicely, and you got to be fluent, and you should have a format of presenting, right? So you can't haphazardly present. You should know how to present. So go. There are a lot of programs like this. Grand rounds are happening always. So try to be attentive and go to these things, and then it will be easier for you to follow up things, right?
We will try to do grand rounds almost 3 times every week till they have the exam, Dr. Frank. So I think we'll start the case. Are we ready?
I'm waiting for the presenter. Has she joined?
Presenter? No, she has not joined.
I just take it up. She had problems in joining in even the trial run.
Why? Internet issue.
Maybe. We are not very sure. She has just disconnected and then joined. Then she could do it.
What is her name?
Sarah. Join Sarah?
No.
There is a person called Sara Tambi.
Sara Tambi.
She is in the waiting room.
In the waiting room. No, no, she's not there in the waiting room.
She has gone out and come up again. She's coming.
Her system has got a problem.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Sagar is there. Can you tell about the cases which they will keep in the exam? Something about the long case, short case. Can you please tell about that till the candidate joins?
Yes. The long case, the ear, you will have cholestoma. Cholestoma. Until you get any case you will get, unless you are very unfortunate, you will get only cholestoma in the ear. And then other chances, they generally don't keep long cases in the nose. CA maxilla or nasopharynx or things like that, they won't keep. What they keep, they will keep those cases as a short cases. Other long cases are, one is pyriform fossa growth with the Oka fixity or post-crical growth, and the most common case what they keep is the CA larynx. CA larynx, T3N0M0 or T4A is the ideal case for discussion. But cholestoma is the dangerous case because cholestoma you can fail. CA larynx, it's very, because they will expect you to know everything about cholestoma. They'll go basics. They will ask you what are the boundaries of attic. Okay, when they go, he doesn't know what's the boundaries of attic. No, like they make ask simple questions like they don't ask mucosal folds. They won't ask how the cholestoma spread. They won't ask how you remove cholestoma from the sinus tympani. It's all the questions if they ask you, you'll be very, very happy that you are going to pass with the flying colors. But what is the problematic thing is that they'll ask, how do you classify perforations, tympanic membrane perforations? If you don't answer, like what why, see, all the questions have got a reason. Okay, so why they ask about tympanic membrane perforation? They want to know whether you know what is a safe disease or unsafe, is mucosal disease or a squamous disease. So anatic perforation is a squamous disease. But past tensor perforation, or not all perforations are mucosal disease. So you have a squamous disease as well as mucosal disease. So you got to classify accordingly. So you basically classify past flaccida perforation, past tensor perforation, a central perforation, and a marginal perforation. So why marginal perforation is? Marginal perforation is an unsafe disease. Okay, what is this? These are all undergraduate questions. Don't we know? We are an MS postgrad. This is what they will expect. This is what they will start from. Okay, when you have a problem with these type of things, you will have trouble. So other this thing is basically they will ask you, why do you look for 3-point tenderness? Why the patient has got pain? What does that indicate? Simple. No, CSOM is a painless disease. If you have a pain, that means patient is having got a osteoarthritis is going for impending complications like mastoid tenderness, subperiosteal abscess, meningitis, or extradural abscess. All these things produces pain, or it may be because of a otitis externa, which you will find out with your tragal tenderness. So small things like that. If you are stuck, I don't say the people don't know. We are all doing postgraduate for 3 years, you'll definitely know, but you will not express yourself.
There's one they call yes. Who's that? Yes. No, she's come on. Huh? Well, what's the problem? And our side or their side? Their side.
So if that is the problem, you got to be very careful when you are presenting an ear case. So ear, you got to be thorough. So larynx, it's okay. And then small anatomical details and other things, they might not give much importance to that. But ear, because with the microscope, they see all the parts. What are all parts they'll see, they will ask you, they will expect you to do, expect you to know. Okay, so that is the problem. But once you have answered all these things, then they'll go for bigger things like colostoma spreads and things like that. But the main problem is our students mess up with the basic things. The definitions are always definitions. You got to mug up and tell. There is no other go. You can't tell when you see when they ask what is CSOM, you got to give an exact diagnosis of CSOM. When they ask you a cholesteatoma, you give an exact cholesteatoma. If you don't do that, you will end up in trouble. So once you have not answered these basic questions, and you will get exposed, and they will give you an opinion as if that you are not good enough. That's the problem with the simple cases, ear cases, right? But short cases, even if you do 1 or 2 short cases very badly, you can make it with your long cases. If you don't do your long case well, then you got to do all your short cases well to get a good marks. Or you got.
What are the short cases? What are the other cases which can be kept?
Short cases, you can, any of these cases can be kept as a short case also. So other short cases, they can keep you a thyroid, they can give you a parotid, they can give you a submandibular gland, and then neck. These things are all. And then they can give an unknown primary. Nasopharynx, CA nasopharynx, you can have they can keep you as a short case. CA maxilla, malignancies. If you are not, if you don't get any one of these cases, they can even case a AFRS or polyposis. Very
septal deviation will be kept. Septal deviation.
Not for a postgraduate.
Not for postgraduate.
If they keep a septal deviation, you are in trouble.
Oh.
You are in trouble.
Okay.
Okay. So they will ask all sort of questions. And if you are not answering any one of these questions, you will get exposed that this fellow doesn't even know septum case. So that's the problem. And if you, for example, if there is a anterior commissure involvement in a CA larynx, there's an anterior commissure and opposite cord is involved or not is the debate. That's fine. When you tell that this cord is just entering anterior commissure and one fellow says it's an arch tumor, go to a opposite cord also, that's fine. Because that amount of this thing they will accept. But for example, I have seen people who can't confidently tell which side the septal deviation is.
Oh.
Whether there's a right side deviation or left side deviation, you get all sort of confusions in the exams.
Okay.
There was a vocal polyp for a postgraduate. That postgraduate, till they asked her to go and see the case and come back 2 times, 3 times, she couldn't tell polyp arises from which cord. So when she sees the ideal, she gets confused with the, like when you take
mirror image. The mirror image.
So and examiners got fed up with that. So these are all the things, the very basic things, no? Like when you do an ideal, right side will look only on the patient's right side is right side only. Only the image is inverted, not the sides. you get confused with the sides also will get inverted, then you have trouble. Okay, so these things you should do. You should be very, very careful. You can have vocal polyp, vocal papillomas, things like that, be kept as a short cases. And tonsillar growth or benign tumors of tonsils, oropharyngeal tumors like palatal swellings and all these stuff. Short cases, anything they can keep.
Anything they'll give. Short case.
Nasolabial cyst they can keep. PCR they can keep. A swelling ear. A differential diagnosis.
Preauricular sinus.
Preauricular sinus is very no, that they don't keep. Generally they don't keep. They can keep as a spotters like Oskies and things like they keep as the spotter, yes, but not as a case because nothing much to discuss. No, nothing much to ask from the patient. Symptomatology and things like that are all very basics. And then
CA cheek. CA cheek.
CA cheek, yes, they can CA
Long
cheek.
case or short case?
Yes, she has come.
Abba. Madam, Devame, waiting for you.
Sarah, we're all waiting for you. Somebody unmute Sarah, please. Sarah is a very soft-spoken girl who joined our unit some 2-3 years back. And when she joined, we are all very scared that how this girl will become third year and take control of the unit. Of all these 3 years of and my third year PG that time was Raghavi.
Yeah.
She was such a dominant.
Super brilliant girl, Raghavi.
No, she's a dominant girl in the ward, and she'll get the things done. And we are wondering how Sarah is going to do that. She is doing a wonderful work with a smiling face without becoming authoritative. Okay. Yes, sir. Good morning. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Welcome, Dr. Sarah.
Thank you, sir. Good evening,
Good.
sir.
All the very best.
Much time. We can go straight. Don't get tensed up. Okay.
Yes, sir. Good evening to one and all. I'll be presenting a case of Ms. Tulasi, a 25-year-old female working as a daily wage laborer coming from Coimbatore, who presented with chief complaints of right ear discharge on and off since childhood, and hard of hearing on the right side for the past 1 year.
Okay. Before going into the details, what are all the cardinal symptoms of the ear disease?
Sir, cardinal symptoms of ear disease include ear discharge, ear pain, tinnitus, vertigo, bleeding from the ear. Sir.
Well, that's all not cardinal symptoms, but you have missed hard of hearing.
Hard of hearing, yes.
Now, 5 cardinal symptoms, right? Ear discharge, hard of hearing, tinnitus, vertigo, and then ear pain.
Ear
Okay,
pain.
right. Go to a presenting history.
History of presenting illness. Patient complained of right-sided ear discharge, which was on and off since childhood. Discharge was scanty, greenish, foul-smelling, and occasionally blood-stained. And ear discharge was aggravated usually by upper respiratory infections and relieved partially with medications.
Is it only upper respiratory tract infection?
So according to the patient's history, they told only upper respiratory infection.
Complaints what patient tells in our way. You should not put leading questions. But for example, presenting illness, you got to give leading questions. What are all the common things which increases the ear discharge? Otherwise, how the infection reaches middle ear?
Sir,
Any discharge, I mean any middle ear discharge, overall the infection will get aggravated.
Sir, can be aggravated by exposure to cold, sir.
What are all the pathways of infection to the middle ear? Upper respiratory tract infection goes to a middle ear through a knee station tube.
Eustachian tubes.
Then,
From the external auditory canal, infection can enter.
so this you should ask, right?
Yes.
Water entering the ear can produce ear discharge.
Yes, sir.
And then third one is
Third one is any partially treated infections,
any
which was not completely treated, sir. Partially
mastoid
treated
infection.
mastoid infections.
That is mastoiditis. Okay, so the common things are all one is eustachian tube, second one is through the external auditory canal, third one is from the mastoid. Very, very rarely a blood-borne infection can cause the activation of the infection again or aggravated the ear discharge. Okay, so you should give leading questions for all these things. You told upper respiratory tract infection, or you should ask whether the patient has got discharge following taking head bath or taking bath in the ponds or water entering the ear, and also you should ask this key of whether the patient gets a pain behind the ear and then it started discharging. Okay,
Yes.
right. These are the three things you should ask. Right. Okay. Then.
The last episode was 1 month back, sir.
Okay. So when you ask about an ear discharge, you ask how it started, how long it is there. What are the characteristics of ear discharge you should ask for?
Sir, the nature of the discharge, consistency, color of the discharge, whether it is foul smelling or not, whether it is associated with blood stained.
Okay. So there are 5 characteristic features which are all important to differentiate a discharge, whether it's a serious discharge, mucous discharge, or mucopurulent discharge. Right? Amount, color, consistency, blood stain, and foul smelling. These 5 things will tell you what type of discharge you are dealing with.
Can you repeat it, please?
What type of discharge you see in this type of disease?
Can you repeat the 5?
Sorry?
Sir,
Repeat the 5 points, Dr.
Amount, color, consistency, blood stain, foul smelling. These 5 things will tell you whether it's a serious discharge, mucous discharge, or mucopurulent discharge. I mean, purulent discharge. The purulent discharge is a characteristic feature of a aticoandral disease. The mucopurulent or mucoid discharge is characteristic feature of a mucosal disease or a tuber-tympanic disease. And very rare, and you will get a serious discharge in the allergic otitis media or early stage of infection in the tuber-tympanic disease. So, what is the difference between the tuber-tympanic discharge and aticoandral discharge, Sarah?
sir, tuber-tympanic discharge is usually mucoid or mucopurulent, sir.
What are the characteristics?
Sir, it is usually non-foul smelling and profuse and associated with blood-stained discharge, sir.
It's a profuse discharge, sticky in consistency because it's mucoid, it is sticky, and then it is in color, and it is not foul smelling, not blood stain. That's a mucoid discharge.
Yes, sir.
That is thick and creamy, greenish in color, scanty discharge, not smelling, and sometimes associated with blood. Why blood stain?
Sorry, sir.
Why the discharge is blood stained?
Sir, in aticoandral type of disease, it is usually associated with granulation tissue, which can.
Where do you see the granulation tissue? Usually.
Sir, if there is any osteitis or bare bone, granulation tissue can form over it. Sir.
Whenever you see a cholestoma, there is something inside the cholestoma. That is a keratin debris. Then you have a cholestoma sac. Then outside the sac, you have a peri-sac inflammation. So this peri-sac inflammation might produce osteitis and produce granulation tissue. So every time the granulation tissue is beyond the sac. When the sac is breached or when the sac has got a reaction with the surrounding tissues, you get granulation tissue. So this granulation tissue produces blood. So when you try to clean the ear, because of these granulation tissue or highly vascular tissue, it produces bleeding,
Blood stain.
blood stain. Okay. Yes.
The patient also complained of hard of hearing in the right ear for the past 1 year. Hard of hearing was insidious in onset and progressive, and it was continuous. A patient was unable to hear normal conversations, and there were no associated aggravating or relieving factors.
When you say ear discharge, when you say ear discharge, it may be from the middle ear or very rarely from external ear if it's a serious discharge or sometimes pupil discharge. Right. When you say hard of hearing, what does that mean? Where the disease is?
Sir, it can be in the middle ear, mesotympanum.
Hard of hearing can be from any place. It can be from the external ear, can be middle ear or an inner ear. That doesn't specify you where the problem is. What conditions specify the problem is an associated inner ear involvement in the complaints.
A patient can have associated tinnitus,
Yes.
vertigo. Sir.
Vertigo. These two things, most probably, there's a the tinnitus can come in the external canal also, middle ear also. But usually, when the patient complains of external canal or middle ear, patient complains of vertigo or tinnitus, you should always think of an associated inner ear involvement. Then
Yes.
ear pain. What is when the patient has got pain, what does that mean?
Sir, ear pain can be associated with complications, sir, or any external otitis externa.
Okay. So what type of complications?
Sir, if there is any
Before you joined, I told before you joined the meet, I told them all the ear condition complications produces pain. One is osteitis,
mastoiditis.
mastoiditis, then extradural abscess,
Yes.
then subperiosteal abscess,
Yes.
meningitis, intracranial problems, then osteitis. All these conditions, extensive osteitis, all these conditions produces pain. It depends upon what the condition is, dull aching pain or a severe pain. Okay. Apex petrositis, all these conditions produces pain. Okay. That means patient is going for complications. Right?
Yes.
If you have a ear pain without problem in the ear, what is that called?
Referred otalgia.
Referred otology. Right. What are all the common nerves which will involve in the referred otology?
Sir, fifth nerve can be involved if the temporomandibular joint and dental pathology can cause referred otalgia.
Yes.
Sir, then ninth and 10th cranial nerve, if there's any laryngeal or pharyngeal pathology, can be referred to the ears.
Okay.
C1, C2.
C1 has got no sensory supply.
Sir, cervical spine pathology can cause compression of the root.
I think C1 has got no sensory supply. C2, C3. Okay, so that will produce pain in the ear. Okay, right, fine. That's called referred otologia. Okay, so the common short notes what they ask in the 2-mark questions. Right, next.
So there was no history of headache or fever, no history of blurring of vision or double vision, no nausea or vomiting, no history of any facial weakness or limb weakness or imbalance.
Okay, what all these things are put together? You want to tell a single line? What do you tell?
Sir, there are no features of complications.
Complications. Where do you get headache?
headache can be a part of also meningitis, subdural, extradural abscess, brain abscess, also in mastoiditis or petrous epicytis.
How often you take CT scan for these patients?
Sir, if you're suspecting intracranial complications, we have to take CT scans.
Otherwise, you don't take, is it?
No, otherwise, if we are planning for surgical intervention,
All surgical intervention you do CT scan? Fine, we are doing it now, that's different, but on paper. If you're going to do a modified radical mastectomy for a patient who got a cholesteatoma, is CT scan mandatory?
Sir, it is. We have to see the if there is any tegmen or sinus plate erosions.
Let that be eroded. What is it? You are going to do a modified radical mastectomy. You are opening up, you are going to see there is an eroded.
Sir,
If you are going to do a small surgeries, if you are going to do a small cholesteatoma, small surgeries, you
yes.
remove the tick and then reconstruct. It's mandatory to do a CT scan to find out whether the patient has got extensive involvement or not. So when there's an extensive involvement, you will not plan for a small surgeries. First. Second thing is, if the patient has got an impending complications, take a CT scan. Okay. Then the third one is the VIP patients. It's always safer. Then you do it for a patient who have got a, we call as a chip in the shoulder type of patients, always complaining, always doing this. For a medical legal cost, you want to take a CT scan. Otherwise, CT scan is not mandatory because you expose him to the more radiation exposure. But if a patient who has got an headache, you have not got a CT scan. Say for a patient has got an headache, I am operating. I didn't know the patient has got a headache. When I am operating, you are telling me that the patient has got a headache. What should I do? I suspect extradural abscess. What should I do?
Sir, intra-op, sir.
Yes. Intra-op, suddenly Sarah tells, sir, this patient always complained of headache, sir.
Sir, intra-op, so we have to inspect the extension of the cholesteatoma, sir.
That's what you have extended, like you have removed cholestoma from the temporal bone completely.
So post-op we can.
You suspect extradural abscess. What do? You can open up the tegment, continue opening up a tegment to check up whether there is any extradural abscess. Okay, so those patients, you pull out the tegment plate and check for extradural abscess. Because the patient complains of headache, it is always safer to check up whether the patient has got extradural abscess. Right? The patient has got fever.
Yes, sir.
Where all you will get fever in the cholesteatoma?
Sir, in meningitis,
Okay.
also in mastoiditis can be associated.
Very good. Then, what other complication produces fever?
Sir,
You always travel by street. I think that's the problem. If you go by train, what do you see on the railway station?
Sir, sorry. Sir, lateral sinus thrombosis.
Lateral sinus thrombosis. So that you should be very careful of. Subperiosteal abscess, lateral sinus thrombosis, mastoiditis, meningitis. When you get bradycardia.
So bradycardia can be associated with the brain abscess.
Brain abscess. Okay. So these are all the things you should know. Where you get double vision?
Double vision in petrous epicytis.
Petrous epicytis. Okay. Then nausea, vomiting.
associated with meningitis or brain abscess. Extradural or subdural can produce nausea, vomiting.
Any intracranial extension can produce nausea, vomiting, facial weakness. Then these are all the complications which should be kept in your mind when you see a extensive cholecytoma. Next slide. Okay.
In past history, there was no history of any systemic illnesses in the past, no history of tuberculosis, coronary artery disease, epilepsy, diabetes, or systemic hypertension. No history of any previous surgeries or blood transfusion or allergy to drugs. In personal history, patient consumed mixed diet, sleep and appetite were normal, bowel and bladder were regular. There was no significant family history.
Okay. What are all the significant family history? Did you ask for the socio-economic status of the patient?
Sir, she's coming from a poor socioeconomic status.
So the people who stay, how many people are staying in the home?
Sir, herself and her parents.
Is it a well-ventilated house, well-illuminated house?
It is a small house, sir.
So
Ventilated.
these are all matters. When you have a lot of people living in a small place, the chances for cross infections are high. A well-ventilated place takes away the infection the upper respiratory tract infection producing organism very fast. If it's not a well-ventilated place, the chances of repeated upper respiratory tract infection is high. Not well-illuminated places, the foment infection chances are all high. So these are all the things you should ask for. Then you should ask what is the significance of the vegetarian diet, a non-vegetarian or a mixed diet.
Sir,
this is very common when there is a protein energy malnutrition. So when you are a vegetarian and if you are in a poor socioeconomic station, poor socioeconomic status, then the chances for you to get a upper respiratory tract infections are very difficult to get a good protein when you are poor and when you are poor and vegetarian, right? Cheap proteins are easier to get in the non-vegetarian poors compared with that of the vegetarian poors. Okay.
yes.
Then this completes your history, right? After the history, analyzing your symptomatology, what do you think the disease you are dealing with?
Sir, with respect to the history, I think it is chronic otitis media.
Right. Is there a lesion? There's a lesion. What is the lesion and where is the lesion? Where is the lesion?
Sir, in the middle ears.
Middle ear. Okay. The patient has got a discharge out of hearing, so you want to tell it's a middle ear. Right? What disease is that?
Sir, it is
What's the pathology?
pathology is inflammatory.
Inflammatory, a chronic inflammation of the. So most probably it is a
Chronic
disease. Why do you say it's anticoagulant disease?
because of the characteristic of the discharge and the prolonged history. Sir.
Prolonged history, and also patient gives history of hard of hearing for normal. So all these things are most probably you are dealing with an anticoagulant disease. Keep it in your mind that this has got to be an anticoagulant disease because you are taking it for your MS exam. Keep a tuber disease for your MS exam usually. Okay. Then, so you think, what is CSOM? I mean, what is chronic suppurative? What is media?
Sir, it is a chronic suppurative inflammation of the mucoperiosteal lining of the middle ear cleft.
Mucoperiosteal lining of the middle ear cleft. What's the WHO definition for CSOM? Continuous or intermittent orthoria through a permanent non-intact tympanic membrane 3 months duration is chronic suppurative aortic media. So to say a patient a chronic suppurative aortic media, we should have two things. One is continuous or intermittent orturia. That can be 10 years back, 5 years back. After that patient, even after 6 months back, after that patient might not have any discharge. But patient should have a history of repeated discharge sometime. So here discharge is a must. Second one is when you examine the patient, patient should have a perforation. Perforation can be a past tense of perforation, that should be a permanent perforation. Permanent, it's not only perforation. If you put a patient grommet, the grommet is discharging for more than 3 months. That is also called chronic suppurative aortic media, because it's not that perforation, permanent non-intact tympanic membrane. That is called CSOM. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That is chronic suppurative aortic media. When you see a perforation, okay, present the case.
So next, general examination. Patient is moderately built and nourished, conscious, oriented to time, place, and person. Temperature was normal. Pulse rate was 78 beats per minute. Blood pressure was 110 by 70 millimeters of mercury. Respiratory rate was 16 per minute. There was no pallor, icterus, cyanosis, clubbing, generalized lymphadenopathy, or bilateral pitting pedal edema.
Professor Anto,
Yes.
can you just repeat the WHO because the voice was not correct? The WHO definition of
Yeah. That is the continuous or intermittent orturia. Permanent non-intact tympanic membrane
to a permanent non-intact tympanic membrane
for more than 3 months duration.
for more than 3 months duration. Thank you, Professor Anto. Please carry on.
Okay. So that is that is to tell you that even discharging grommet for more than 3 months is CSOM only. Okay, right.
So next is local examination. I have examined the patient and
We are all proud ENT surgeons. You can't call this local examination. Call it an ENT examination. Because it's your ENT exam. You are going to get MS ENT. You are not going to get MS local.
yes.
The problem is she is in pediatric posting now.
Oh,
Not presented the case to me. The first time she is presenting. Okay, fine, right, present.
Sir, coming to the ENT examination, examination of ear, I have examined with Bull's lamp and adequate exposure. Coming to the right ear, preauricular region, pinna, postauricular region, and external auditory canal. Preauricular region, pinna, and postauricular region were normal. External auditory canal showed minimal discharge, which was greenish and creamy. On the left side, preauricular region, pinna, postauricular.
You got to finish everything on that right ear, then go to the left ear. Okay.
Okay. Otoscopic examination on the right ear.
What is the normal color of the tympanic membrane?
So it is pearly white in color.
Okay. When the tympanic membrane is diseased, what will happen to the pearly white?
So depending on the disease, it can become dull and lusterless, or it can become congested,
Okay.
or amber colored in serous otitis media.
When will the tympanic membrane reddish in color?
Reddish in color can occur in active phase of otosclerosis, sir, or any
What?
glows,
That's called
flamingo signs.
flamingo sign. Okay. Then
If there is a vascular mass behind the intact TM, it can reddish hues.
okay. Acute otitis media.
Can produce congestion. Yes.
Professor Anthony, I just want to interrupt. I don't know whether the exam pattern has changed or the answer has changed. But whenever there is a sort of, if we can classify every answer, it will be very impressive. Like you can say infective, inflammatory, for example, hemotympanum, like that. If you can actually classify every answer, no, it will be very. I used to do that when I answered.
Yeah, I agree with you, but the problem is examiners will lose patience if you are giving answers like this.
Oh, okay.
So this is the ideal way to answer. If there is a write a note on red drum, you classify. As you said, you got to classify. They want flamingo. You are talking about inflammatory diseases for a long time, means they will get fed up. In an exam, you got to give the answer what they want.
Okay.
But when you are writing, you can write all the stories. For example, when you say tonsillectomy indications, you can classify it as an inflammatory causes, as a complication of the as a local complications, and huge big tonsils producing complications, and miscellaneous like that you can classify, but not when you are presenting. For example, if they ask what are the indications for total laryngectomy, so you keep on talking about how do you classify total laryngectomies, sometimes they will get irritated.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Present.
Sir, on otoscopy examination, in the pars flaccida, in the region of pars flaccida, greenish, creamy, purulent discharge with epithelial debris was seen, which was cleaned, and perforation was seen in the region of pars flaccida. The edge of the perforation appeared as smooth, thickened, and pale. So then the pars.
Only for a pars tensa perforation, not for the pars flaccida perforation. Okay.
Okay.
Then, is there any sputum erosion?
Yes, a sputum erosion was seen. Sir.
Partial sputum erosion, right? Not
Yes.
complete sputum erosion. The partial sputum. You see, beyond what else you see? What are the what is the lateral boundary of a teeth?
Sir, lateral, it is formed by scutum, sir. Lateral attic wall is formed by the scutum and part of the pars flaccida.
Pars flaccida. Okay, where the pars flaccida, pars tensa differentiates? From what level it is pars flaccida and what level is pars tensa?
Above the malleolar folds.
Above the anterior and posterior malleolar fold is pars flaccida. Okay, so what are the contents of the attic?
Sir, attic contains body of head of the malleus, head and neck of the malleus, body and short process of incus.
What are the structures you see through the perforation?
Sir, here the head of the malleus and the body of incus appear to be eroded, sir.
So somebody asks for an attic erosion. I can't see. I can't show them. Show them where is the attic erosion. Yeah, that is the attic erosion. Right, the partial attic erosion is here. Okay, fine. So have you seen cholesteatoma there?
Sir, the discharge was typical, sir, and there were epithelial debris present.
Can you see the cholesteatoma? What is the color of the cholesteatoma?
Sir, it is ivory color. Sir.
Dirty white in color.
Yes.
Okay, it's dirty white in color. What is the consistency?
Consistency is soft in consistency.
It's like a dough. It's like a dough. Okay, it's a doughy in consistency. Take cholesteatoma. What is the smell of the cholesteatoma? Every time you examine the ear, you try to clean the ear. You got to smell the discharge. If you don't want to smell, you want to tell it is fishy in order. Hold your breath, take it near your nose, act as if you are checking the smell. Because examiner will be standing somewhere and watching you examine the patient. They will tell you that you have not check the smell of the discharge, right? You got to see the smell of the discharge. Okay, so present. Good.
So next, coming to the left ear.
You are not presented the ear finding right here.
Sir, then there were no granulation tissue or polyps visualized.
Okay.
Then the pars tensa appeared dull and lusterless, sir.
Okay. What is scutum? What is the part of which bone?
Sir, squamous temporal bone, sir.
It's a downturn part of the squamous part of the temporal bone. It protects all the vital structures, and it's the scutum means shield. It's head of the malleus and body of the incus. Because pars flaccida is very small. Okay. The most of the outer atic wall is formed by the scutum, right? So whenever you see the pars flaccida, how do you classify pars flaccida retraction?
Sir, pars flaccida retraction grade 1 is it is
What classification is that?
sir, TOS classifications.
TOS classification, yes.
Sir, grade 1 is a small attic dimple. Grade 2, it is retracted over the neck of the malleus. Grade 3, there is a partial erosion of the scutum, sir. And grade 4, there is complete erosion of scutum.
Okay. Right. Where does this where the colostoma forms? Colostoma forms at which place?
So most commonly in the Prusac space.
What are the boundaries of Prusac space?
Sir, Prusac space is bounded medially by the neck of the malleus, laterally by the lateral malleolar fold, sir.
Right.
Yeah, superiorly.
Wait. What is the lateral boundary of attic?
Attic is scutum and the pars flaccida, sir.
Now you tell me what is the lateral boundary of Prusac space? Laterally bounded by?
Scutum and pars flaccida.
Scutum. It is bounded laterally by the pars flaccida. Superiorly by the fanning fibers of the
lateral malleolar.
Inferiorly by the
so the tympanic diaphragms.
Neck, lateral process of the malleus. Okay, lateral process of the malleus. Because the fibers are attached around the neck of the malleus, so inferiorly by the lateral process. Okay, the Prusac space is bounded by the neck of the malleus, laterally by the pars flaccida, superiorly by the fanning fibers of the superior malleolar lateral malleolar fold, and inferiorly by the lateral process of the malleus. Okay. There are two processes in the malleus. One is the lateral process, other one is the anterior process.
Anterior process.
Right. Then from the Prusac space, overall the colostoma can spread.
So from this Prusac space, it can spread into superior inguinal space. First into the lateral malleal space and then into the superior inguinal space. And from superior inguinal space, it can spread to the additus and antrums.
To what pathway it goes? Medial to the incus or lateral to the incus?
Lateral.
Sure. Why is this important?
Sir, in cases of congenital cholesteatoma, it is.
When you are operating, when you open up an attic and there is no cholesteatoma, you got to know whether you got to remove the incus and see or not. A cholestoma is a lateral cholestoma, otherwise called attic cholestoma, usually travels lateral to the incus. It goes from the Prusac space, go to a superior inguinal space. From there, it goes lateral to the body of the incus, to the antrum, and go to the antrum. Right? So, if it's a posterior superior traction bucket cholestoma, posterior superior traction cholestoma goes through the isthmus tympanicus posticus, inferior inguinal space, medial to the body of the incus. So, Every time you see a patient with a cholesteatoma, posterior superior cholestoma, you got to be doubly sure that you got to remove the incus to check up whether the cholestoma goes medial to the body of the incus. Simple words, attic cholestoma, you need not, when you are only cholestoma only in the attic space, you need not remove the incus and see. If the cholestoma and the posterior superior retraction bucket cholestoma, you are always got to remove the incus to see the undersurface. Okay.
Yes.
Right. How it comes to the mesotympanum?
Sir, it can come through the tympanic isthmus into the.
When it comes from above downwards, it's an anterior and posterior pouch of Walrasch.
Sir, if it is through a defect in the tensor tympani fold, it can, an anterior epitympanic cholesteatoma can come into the mesotympanum.
Whenever there is a huge hole in the tympanic diaphragm, anterior epitympanum, see, actually the anterior epitympanum can arise from the saccus superior or anterior sac of the saccus medius. From the anterior sac of the saccus medius, the tympanic diaphragm will be complete. So that it's not very well ventilated. The cholestoma is anterior epitympanic cholestoma is more common in these patients. If it is develops from the saccus superior, it is communicating with the mesotympanum. Usually cholestoma will not occur there unless it's an extensive cholestoma. So once it becomes extensive cholestoma, it's a very ventilated area. Nothing is there to suck. So it's very rare. Usually a superior space cholestoma comes down through an anterior and posterior pouch of Walrasch. Generally. Anterior pouch of Walrasch, posterior pouch of Walrasch. Right? If it is one minute. If it is a mesotympanic cholestoma goes above, then it to the isthmus defects. That is the isthmus tympanicus anticus and isthmus tympanicus posticus. It goes to the attic. Right?
Yes.
Somebody asked what is the pouch of Walrasch. Between the tympanic membrane and the malleolar fold, you have a space called a pouch of Walrasch. Anteriorly, you have a space called an anterior pouch of Walrasch, and posteriorly, you have a space called posterior pouch of Walrasch. Okay. Yes. This is about the attic cholestoma. How does the mesotympanic cholestoma occur?
Sir, mesotympanic cholesteatoma usually from the postero-superior retraction pocket, sir. It can go medial to the.
It can be posterior retraction pocket or posterior perforation. It can be a secondary cholestoma, or a primary acute cholestoma. Okay. If it goes to a primary, it goes to the posterior. What happens?
So, sorry, sir.
Posterior superior retraction pocket cholestoma spreads where first?
Sir, it will spread into the.
How it comes to the hypotympanum?
Yes.
How it comes to the hypotympanum? There are two big spaces.
Sir, it initially involves a retrotympanum, and from there it continues into the hypotympanum. Initially, it will involve the retrotympanum followed by hypotympanum.
Retrotympanum has contained two spaces. What are they?
Sir, sinus tympani and facial recess.
Sinus tympani and facial recess. So first it involves sinus tympani and facial recess. And it's around the lenticular process, long process, lenticular process, suprastructure. Right. Then it goes to towards the medial wall. From there it ascends above. So it goes through a isthmus tympanicus posticus to an inferior inclural space, medial to the body of the incus, and goes to the antrum. Similarly, anteriorly it goes to the isthmus tympanicus anticus. From the isthmus tympanicus anticus, it goes to the anterior epicus. This is how the posterior mesotympanic cholestoma goes above.
Can you repeat that, Professor Anthony? Because your voice is breaking a little. Can you slowly repeat that? Posterior. Can you please repeat that?
Yeah. See, when the colostoma occurs at the posterior superior region,
Okay.
shapes around the ossicles.
Okay.
From the ossicle, it goes to the posterior, it's called retro tympanum. Retro tympanum, you have two wedge-shaped spaces, sinus tympani and facial recess. If you move sinus tympani and facial recess, it can descend down to the hypotympanum. Or it can go above. There's a defect in the diaphragm. Commonly, you have isthmus tympanicus posticus, sometimes anticus. Through this, it will go to the inferior imperial space posteriorly and an anterior epitympanic space anteriorly. Isthmus tympanicus posticus, actually, the incus develops like this. Then it gets rotated. Okay. The superior surface becomes the lateral surface and the inferior surface becomes the medial surface. So, attic colostoma goes to a superior imperial space which is related to the lateral surface of the incus, which is nothing but the superior surface which got rotated. That's why it's always lateral to the incus. While the inferior surface rotates medially. So if it involves the inferior imperial space, goes medial to it takes the medial pathway. Okay, so any colostoma comes from attic to the mesotympanum through the pouch of Walrasch. If it goes from the mesotympanum to the attic through the isthmus tympanicus. Otherwise, the colostoma of lateral colostomas, it comes always towards the tympanic membrane. The mesotympanic colostomas are medial colostomas. It always goes along the medial wall of the middle ear cavity. That's why the complications are relatively more common with the mesotympanic colostoma than the attic colostoma. When you see a patient who has got an attic colostoma at one ear and a mesotympanic colostoma on the other ear, both the ears, the hearing loss is almost equal, then you operate on a posterior mesotympanic colostoma because that is more prone for complications because it's close to the vital structures like facial, plate, crura and other things.
Superb, Professor Anthony. Superb understanding.
Okay, so anything which comes from attic to the mesotympanum through the pouch of Walrasch along the tympanic membrane. Pouch of Walrasch is nothing but the gap between the malleolar folds and the tympanic membrane. Okay, if it goes from mesotympanum to attic, then it's through the isthmus tympanicus posticus and anticus. Attic colostoma is a lateral colostoma, so it goes to the lateral to the body of the incus. The lateral to the body, the lateral surface of the body of the incus is nothing but the superior surface, so it goes to the superior space, lateral to the body of the incus to the adductor tantrum. The inferior surface is medial, so the inferior imperial space medial to the body of the incus and it is the tantrum. Okay, is it clear?
Superb, Professor Anthony. Superb.
Okay, then proceed.
So examination of the left ear, the preauricular region, pinna, postauricular region, and external auditory canal were normal. Tympanic membrane appeared normal and intact. Cone of light was present.
Okay.
So next, coming to the tuning for tests. In the right ear, Rini was negative in 256 and 512 hertz and positive in 1024 hertz. In left ear, Rini was positive in all the frequencies, and Weber was lateralized to the right ear, and absolute bone conduction were not reduced in both the ears.
Okay, what do you understand by this? If a patient who has got, when do you say disease is mild, when do you say moderate, when do you say it's severe?
Sir, if it is negative only in 256 hertz, it is considered as mild conductive hearing loss. Sir.
No. It's very, very rare to have only 256. Weber.
Minimum.
When the patient has got only the Rini positive, but Weber negative, Weber is lateralized, then the hearing loss will be less than 10 decibels. It's about 7 decibels. It takes minimum of 7 decibel hearing loss, inequality between two ears to make the Weber lateral. So, you see a patient who has got a Weber lateral is to call as a mild hearing loss. So when you have what type of hearing loss is this?
Sir, it's a moderate hearing loss.
Moderate hearing loss. When it is moderate hearing loss, how do you check up whether it's a moderate hearing loss or not?
Sir, we can confirm with the pure tone audiometry.
Pure tone audiogram. You are getting about 40 decibel hearing loss in this patient. This is the pathology.
Yes, sir.
What do you think is the pathology?
Sir, if it is less than 40 decibels, then ossicular involvement is unlikely. Sir.
Is it? You have 40 decibel hearing loss. I am telling you, you see the ossicles are already got eroded. Still patient has got 40 decibel hearing loss. What does that mean?
Sir, the cholesteatoma could be bridging the gap.
It can be a bridging cholestoma. So hearing loss cannot give you an idea. How much hearing loss there will be when the patient has got only perforation? A small perforation in an anterior quadrant and a posterior quadrant. What will be the hearing loss?
Sir, less than 25 dBs.
Only perforated drum can produce hearing loss of 25 decibel or less only. Hearing loss will be more if it is an anterior perforation and a posterior perforation of the same size. Which perforation will produce more hearing loss?
Sir, posterior will produce more hearing loss.
Posterior perforation will produce more hearing loss because the effective vibrating area and the posterior is more compared with that of the anterior because of the tilt of the tympanic membrane. The posterior part is more exposed laterally compared with the anterior part because of the anterior tympanic recess. Somebody has asked why retraction is more common in the posterior superior area. So you see the distance between the annulus of malleus and the tympanic annulus, the posterior superior area it is larger compared with that of the anterior areas. And then anterior mesotympanum is the well ventilated area. The posterior mesotympanum gets the ventilation. One is from the anterior mesotympanum, which is far off. When the tympanic membrane gets retracted, the annulus of the malleus will be touching the promontory. So the ventilation will be reduced. Then the ventilation depends upon the mastoid axial system. When a patient has got a sclerosed mastoid, the ventilation will be poor. And then when the distance is more, the same amount of the middle layer, fibrous layer, then the chances for retraction is higher.
Voice is breaking, Anto. Please, Professor Anto, can you repeat why the retraction pocket is common in the posterior quadrant?
Yes, 2 points. One is when there's a negative pressure, all of the middle layer, most ventilated area is anterior mesotympanum.
Okay.
The protympanum is the most ventilated area. So the retraction chances are more posterior compared with that of the anterior.
Okay.
The thing is, when the patient gets retracted, negative pressure retracted, the malleus will touch the promontory. Once it touches the promontory, the flow of ventilation from the anterior mesotympanum will slowly get cut off. Then the ventilation entirely depends upon the mastoid axial system.
Okay.
Right.
The ventilation depends on the mastoid axials.
Mastoid axial system.
Okay.
When the mastoid is well limitized, it manages.
Okay.
The sclerosed mastoid, it will go for negative pressure sucking effect. And then the distance between the annulus of the malleus and the tympanic sulcus is maximum at the posterior superior area. The fibers are the same. So anteriorly the fibers are very close to each other. The fibers are very close to each other. Posteriorly the gap is more. So it has become little flaccid. So it sucks easily.
Okay.
Why the posterior mesotympanum goes posterior easily compared to that of the anterior mesotympanum. Is it clear?
Super, super. Thank you. Thank you. Very clear.
Very clear. So, posterior tympanum, posterior part is more exposed outside, so the hearing loss will be comparatively more compared to the anterior part, the same size of perforation. Okay. Then what about the if it's more than 25 decibels, Sarah?
Sir,
If this thing is central perforation with the hearing loss of 25 decibel to 40 decibel, what do you think?
sir, 25 to 40 decibels. Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir,
Perforation, posterior central perforation, the hearing loss is about 35 decibel, 40 decibel. What do you suspect? Not bridging cholestoma, obviously.
yes.
What do you suspect?
Sir, the bridging cholesteatoma has reduced the impact of the ossicular erosion, sir.
No. If a central perforation got a 40 decibel hearing loss, posterior central perforation, 40, what do you suspect?
Sir, there could be associated ossicular.
Erosion produces 60 decibels, no more than 40 decibels, right? Posterior quadrant, large perforation, what do you expect? Something to do with
round window baffle effect. Sir.
Yeah. So posterior perforation, which involves round window, it produces round window baffle effect. Because of that, you can have 40 decibel hearing loss. But in a case of a cholesteatoma, if there's 40 decibel hearing loss, usually it is a bridging cholesteatoma. Okay? For example, attic perforation like this, it's a 40 decibel hearing loss. You got to suspect a cholesteatoma hearing somewhere.
Yes.
Then, if there is a 60 decibel hearing loss, you always suspect or ossicular fixity, which will usually doesn't occur in the cholesteatoma because there will be a certain amount of bridging cholesteatoma will be there. When the patient has got an intact drum with an ossicular non-functioning, then you will have 60 decibel hearing loss, conductive hearing loss. When the patient has got a retracted drum, very likely you will have a 60 decibel hearing loss. Okay, very rare. You understand? You don't expect ossicular erosion in a cholesteatoma with a 60 decibel hearing loss. You expect ossicular erosion in cholesteatoma will be about 40-45 decibels only because there will be a certain amount of bridging cholesteatoma. Okay.
Yes.
Then how do you do tuning fork test?
Sir, Renis. Sir, the Renis is set to vibration, sir, and it is it can be either we can assess the duration or intensity Renis test. So initially the vibrating tuning fork is kept over the in front of the ear, and if the patient when the patient stops hearing.
No. The idea is you should see the positive finding. What is the positive finding? Air conduction is better than bone conduction. That means patient should not hear with bone conduction, but still should hear with air conduction. So first you keep the patient on the mastoid process. Once the patient stops hearing it, keep it in front of the ear along the acoustic axis 2 centimeters away from the external auditory canal. Keep it like this. Okay, the patient will hear. Then it is air conduction is better than bone conduction. The patient is not hearing. Then you set the tuning fork vibrate again, keep it in front of the ear. Then once the patient stops hearing it, keep it over the mastoid process. That confidently tells you that bone conduction is better than air conduction. Those are the things you should do. Okay?
Yes.
Right. First you check it on from the mastoid, then do it from the opposite side. Right. Okay. Then how do you do absolute bone conduction test?
Sir, absolute bone conduction test. Again, the tragus is compared with the hearing of the examiner, sir. Initially, vibrating tuning fork is kept on the mastoid with the external auditory canal occluded with using a finger. And when the patient stops to hear, it is taken to the and kept on the mastoid process of the examiner. If the examiner continues to hear, then it means that the absolute bone conduction in the patient is reduced.
Right. So you can time it, right? How much an examiner hears. So that gives you an idea of how decrease the hearing of a patient. Right. Next slide.
Sir, there was no tragal tenderness, 3-point tenderness in both the years. Fistula sign, fistula test was
Wait. I will go to basics. Where are the three places you keep the ear, keep the fingers?
Sir, in the Simba concha, retroauricular grooves.
Retroauricular groove.
And tip of the mastoid.
Tip of the mastoid, posterior border of the mastoid. Posterior border of mastoid. Not retroauricular groove, posterior border of mastoid. Why? Mastoid emissary vein. Tip infection. Zimba concha is for?
Sir, mastoid antrums.
Somebody asked what is 3-point tenderness. You use 3 fingers at 3 places on the mastoid process to check for mastoid tenderness. One is on the Zimba concha. Second one is on the posterior border of the mastoid. Third is on the tip. So that you check for the tenderness. Zimba concha corresponds to what?
Sir, mastoid antrums.
What is the surface marking of mastoid antrum?
Sir, McEwen's triangles.
McEwen's triangle. What are the boundaries of McEwen's triangle or suprameatal triangle?
Sir, superiorly it is bounded by the suprameatal crest.
Okay.
And posterior border of the posterior-superior meatal wall, sir.
Okay. Anteriorly, posterior superior meatal wall. Suprameatal crest or temporal line.
And posteriorly, a tangent drawn to the suprameatal crest, which bisects the suprameatal crest.
Drawn to the posterior wall of the suprameatal crest. Okay. So this you got to be very thorough. Okay. Anteriorly, posterior superior meatal wall, superiorly suprameatal crest or a temporal line, posteriorly the tangent on the posterior canal wall, which bisects suprameatal crest. A tangent can be drawn like this, but the bisects the suprameatal crest. So that is the McEwen's triangle. Okay. The 3-point tenderness is assessed simultaneously. Okay, so this is about how deep is the mastoid antrum to that point?
So 1.5 centimeters.
A normal adult is 1.5 centimeter deep to the suprameatal crest is the mastoid antrum. Yes. Then what is fistula test?
So fistula test, it is we are altering the pressure within the by the sigillization or intermittent tragal pressure to vary the pressure within the middle ear, sir. If there is any labyrinthine fistula, or it can produce vertigo and nystagmus during the procedure.
Any without cholesteatoma, can you get a fistula test?
Sir, if there's any traumatic fistula also can, or false positive.
What is third window?
Sir, third, superior semicircular canal dehiscence.
Superior semicircular canal dehiscence also can produce fistula sign. Okay, so fistula sign is fistula test is a test to find out abnormal communication between the membranous labyrinth and the middle ear. The labyrinth is well protected by the bony shell. That's called labyrinth. Okay, membranous labyrinth is well protected by the bony labyrinth. There is a breach in the bony labyrinth. Membranous labyrinth is exposed to the pressure changes. You give a pressure change to find out whether the labyrinth can be stimulated. That's called fistula test. So you can do a fistula test with a sigillization. You can do a fistula test with the intermittent pressure on the tragus. You can use a bulb with the attached to the otoscope to check the pressure difference. And if you see an oral polyp, you can you see an oral polyp, you can give a pressure on an oral polyp to give a intermittent pressure change. Okay. So what you see, usually patient will see first nystagmus, then giddiness, patient can develop vomit and patient can fall down. Before you do the test, you explain this to the patient, make the patient sit down comfortably, then do the test. Okay, you can even grade it grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3 according to the response. Okay. Is it clear? Am I audible?
Very clear, very audible.
Okay. Then second thing is when you do the fistula test, how do you infer? What is the inference?
Inference, sir, positive or negative fistula tests.
Can be positive, negative, false positive,
All positive.
false negative. What is the causes for false positive?
Sir, in case of Meniere's disease, when there
No
is
fistula, but the fistula is called false positive. What are the condition produces false positive?
sir, Meniere's disease, where there is distension of the saccule which lies against the foot plate.
Early Meniere's disease, right? Not after the busting. Repeated Meniere's. Early Meniere's disease, the distended sac will come close to the foot plate of stapes so that sudden movement of foot plate can produce giddiness. It can be because of intermittent pressure or it can be because of loud sound. What is it called?
Hennebert sign, sir.
Loud sound producing giddiness is called what?
Tullio phenomenon, sir.
Tullio phenomenon. It's a different version of a pressure change produces vertigo. Okay, what is Hennebert sign?
Sir, it is a false positive fistula sign, sir.
Occurs in
Sir, in syphilitic patients.
congenital syphilis. Okay, in the case of a congenital syphilis, you will have a hyperelasticity of the ligaments.
Ligaments.
So a foot plate will become very lax and the foot plate, the annular ligament will become lax. Because lax annular ligament, there's an hypermobility of the foot plate of the stapes produces the fistula reaction when you change the pressure. That's Hennebert sign. Okay?
Yes, sir.
What is false negative? So this can occur also in the third window. Okay, what is false negative?
False negative, even if there is a fistula, it does not.
You get a negative response. What
It
conditions? Example for false negative?
Dead labyrinths.
Dead labyrinth. When the labyrinth is not functioning, repeated separative labyrinthitis destroys all the cells. You will get fistula, but you will not get the response. Anything else? Thick colostoma completely approaching fistula. If that occurs, even though you have a fistula, that might not get the response. Okay. It's very rare. Okay. Then facial examination, meningeal signs, other cranial examinations are all, if you go to that, it will take more time. Okay. So, next slide.
Professor Anthony,
Yes.
I think it's already 10 o'clock. What we will do is, anyway, we are going to do it tomorrow. So
Yes.
you are planned only for till 9 o'clock, but we have gone till then, I know. So we will,
We ask her to tell the diagnosis and stop it.
yes.
Okay. No severe examination, nothing significant, right? No. What's your diagnosis?
So diagnosis is right here, chronic otitis media with active squamosal disease, with moderate conductive hearing loss, without any intracranial or extracranial complications.
Okay, we'll start from this tomorrow. Is it okay, Dr. Janagiram?
Perfect, perfect. So we will stop the Zoom meeting. I want to talk a little. So, my dear friends, so I hope you have enjoyed the session. I'm sure that everybody would have enjoyed the session. There are a few things I want to say about Professor Anthony, because all of you are present, I can tell this now. Professor Anthony is a walking encyclopedia in ENT. Please understand that I learned most of my ENT from Anthony, and though he was my classmate, I used to learn from him. And even today, if I have any doubts, I phone up to Professor Anthony only, because he is very well read. I can put my hands on and say that very few people have got this authority in the whole world of ENT. And I am privileged to say that I'm your friend, Professor Anthony. And more importantly, when we discussed, we were planning till 9 o'clock. You see the passion, involvement which he's showing to teach. And more importantly, you see, many of the examiners, what they'll do is they'll do some already tell the questions to the candidate. But he has just first time Dr. Sara is presenting to Professor Anthony. Simply super. There is no words, Dr. Sara, and you are so bold. I could see a little, I could see, but definitely you did a great job. I really, really thank you. So just for the exam, all the candidates, I want to tell you that we will be continuing these sessions with Professor Anthony. And I'm sure that many more questions he will ask, and we will. I learned a lot of things from Professor Anthony. You know why I am. Many people think I am doing private practice. Why should I do all the grand rounds? What this fellow is getting? Please understand that I am the first student. So I learn every time I listen to Professor Anthony or anybody. I learn, and that is why I do all this. And charity begins at home. I learn and I disperse knowledge. So thank you, Professor Anthony, for being here. We'll meet again 8 o'clock tomorrow with your blessings and fantastic questions, and also the candidate. And I want to really thank Dr. Harsha. Come, man. See, this guy is a techno-savvy guy to the first order. Dr. Sara didn't get connected. And you know what he did? He is controlling Dr. Sara's computer from Royal Pearl. So that is the kind of expertise this guy has. I'm telling you.
Hey, be careful, man.
Be careful. He is like Google, this fellow, Pichai. Pichai. You will be tracked totally. Great, Dr. Harsha. Big hand for you. And thank you all for being here. It's being relayed on Facebook, YouTube. I'm sure many people will be seeing it. It will not be taken. It will be there. And I'm sure that everybody will benefit. Any words, Professor Anthony, you want to say before you conclude? Because anyway, tomorrow we're going to meet. So anything you want to?
250 people, 250 plus.
No. It is actually 5,000, boss. You see the YouTube, you see that. I'm seeing that. No, more than 5,000 people are watching. So this is just a Zoom 240. You have Facebook, you have YouTube. I will give you the complete count at the end of the session. You see. Yeah. So you are so famous, boss. You are so famous, Professor Anthony.
You are famous.
No, I am just a conduit. I am connecting you with the PGs.
So everybody knows when you are doing something, you are serious and you want to really teach the people. So everyone is inclined to see. That's why.
Thank you, Professor Anthony. So I hope we'll meet tomorrow, 8 o'clock. I think Dr. Sara can connect with Harsha and try to rectify that, so that tomorrow you do a trial run before, and we will plan. So thank you, Professor Anthony. Have a good day.
Thank you, Jairam. Thank you, everyone, for your patient listening so far. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sara. God
Thank
bless
you.
you. God bless you.
Thank you.